If the amount of emails I get with people sending me random blue screen messages and just general descriptions of my PC's doing this
weird sound?
my chair, I need to check the event viewer on my chair. It's gonna say under too much load. No, what I was gonna say is it tells me a lot of people don't understand or even know that there's something on Windows called Event Viewer, which actually is logging everything your computer is doing and even persists and can log what happens when blue screens, crashes, and even complete restarts happen. So today we're gonna do hopefully a fairly quick video showing you how to use Event Viewer, how to look at the data, and how to extrapolate what might be happening with your system. That way you can actually get some answers faster than reaching out to a YouTuber who gets thousands of emails in his inbox that is never gonna see your message to begin with. Although clearly I saw some, which has now triggered this video. You can think of Event Viewer as kind of like a black box that's always recording what's happening with your system, everything with your system. So it's pretty easy to get to. Let's just assume you're running on Windows 11. Windows 10 is pretty much the same thing, but you're gonna go to your start menu, you're gonna type Event, and then you'll see it'll automatically fill in Viewer. So when we bring that up, it's gonna bring up this thing that's gonna look like, I don't know what the hell I'm looking at here. That's okay. We're gonna show you the parts that matter. So you're gonna come over here to the left and you're gonna do the drop down for Windows Logs, and then you're gonna click System. And this is now gonna be showing you everything that's happening with your system. Now I'm gonna do a restart so you can see how it even shows when Windows boots what's happened. I cleared the logs right now before we started this video, and you can see so far the only thing that's happened is the clear, and then basically when I opened up Event Viewer right now. So you're gonna see a lot of crap that you're just like, I don't know what the hell's happening. But the stuff that matters will be pretty obvious because it'll have a red X next to it and will basically be like errors, critical stops, all that sort of stuff. So let me go ahead and just restart this system real quick so you can see what it looks like on a fresh boot. And even on a fresh boot, you might actually see some errors, believe it or not. Especially if your operating system's old, if it's got old programs that maybe have registry issues, or even stuff that might have drivers that the product isn't even on your system anymore. You can see all kinds of weirdness. Now, the reason why we're showing this is it actually really helped Phil not that long ago figure out a problem that was happening with our GPU test bench, where on certain titles, he was noticing that he would start the benchmark run, and then he would get crazy stuttering, and then sometimes even a crash or a stutter that would drop all the way down to like 1 FPS, and he couldn't figure out what the hell was happening. And then we kept hearing disconnect and reconnect like USB sounds, thinking that we thought maybe a USB device was causing the problem. But what was actually happening was we used Event Viewer to figure out it was actually the built-in wireless on our Taichi board, our X670E Taichi board, that was constantly crashing and then re-enabling. And what was happening in our benchmarks was we were hearing the driver crash and then the reinitialization of the driver and then the testing and then the failure and then the disconnecting of the driver and the reconnecting of the driver, and it was just non-stop happening. But if it wasn't for Event Viewer, we would have absolutely never thought to go into the BIOS and shut down the Wi-Fi on the board. Now, we could have fixed it probably with doing a driver update or maybe even a firmware update on the built-in wireless, but because it's a test bench that we only use wired for driver reasons and auto update reasons and making sure we're disconnected from the internet when we're testing products that are not released yet, we just opted to go ahead and shut it down. But nothing, absolutely nothing indicated to us that we were gonna have a networking problem. Everything felt like a GPU driver problem. And Phil went through DDU after DDU and tried different drivers, and the problem was persisting. And Phil was ripping out what hair he has left, and we can't have that, okay? So this could help you troubleshoot all kinds of weirdness happening with your system. With that said, now that we've got a fresh boot, we're gonna see everything that happened with the booting of Windows here. So if we go back to Windows Logs, go to System. Look, we even have a couple warnings here already. Distributed COM, I don't know what that is. This application is specific permission settings do not grant local active. I don't know what the that means, but it doesn't really matter. It's just a warning. But this doesn't mean anything to you if I don't show you how to figure out an error. So why don't I go ahead and artificially induce an error? Okay, so here's how we're gonna do that. And this is why Heaven is also a pretty nice tool to have. It's always running. So we've got my 4070 Ti Super right here, which is the card that I did my learning how to reconnect the power connector on there and then reconnect an SMD that I broke off, and it's running just fine. So what we're gonna do right now is an artificial crash. It's not a real crash because I'm forcing it to happen. It has nothing to do with my repair. Anyway, I know for a fact if I push this card to 300 megahertz offset and 1500 on the RAM, we're gonna get what's called a soft crash, where it'll crash when the test runs, but it will be able to recover. And I'll push it hard enough in a little bit to where we won't recover, and we'll show what happens on a full restart. So I'm gonna start the test. You're gonna see it's gonna run for a couple of frames, and then it's probably gonna go black, and then it's gonna look like it's frozen for a while. Here we go. So it's frozen. May have a mouse in the background. Sometimes I do, sometimes I don't. What's happening right now is the driver's trying to recover. Okay, this is normal. Back in the day, drivers would just crash and that was it. And we might even experience that right now if we want to know the truth. Yeah, I think that might actually be a hard crash, which is perfect because we can show you now how even if you don't crash to desktop, I think it's actually gonna do it. Hold on. It's gonna come back, yep. Driver just restarted. We're gonna end up back on the desktop here, I think. I think it just did, yeah, it just did a full system restart. But this is actually good. No, it didn't, it crashed. Okay, so this is impressive. What I started to say is back in the day when a driver crashed, that was it. Oops, driver no longer is initialized, it crashed, Windows doesn't recover, and then you're left having to do the power cycle. But now you're gonna see what actually happened in the background by using Event Viewer. Now, what happened right now is the driver restarted. And because the driver restarted, my overclock didn't reapply unless I reopened MSI Afterburner. But if we go back now to the Event Viewer, and we go to that same dropdown of Windows Logs and System, look at all those errors right there. So we can see that right here, NVLDDMKM, that is the NVIDIA driver. So if we look right here, you can see the first one that happened right now at 10:09. The description for event ID 153 from source NVLDDMKM cannot be found. It's just basically saying that error did not have a message that accompanied it. So sometimes you might actually get a message like in the blue screen where it'll say some sort of like a watchdog or whatever. That just is saying this error was a sort of a generic error, but here's where it happened, and it happened with the NVIDIA driver. And you can see right here, if the event originated from another computer, it doesn't matter. The error occurred on GPU ID 100. That's this guy, because we do have an iGPU on this as well. So if it was like hooked up to the iGPU, it would be whatever that ID is for the iGPU. But 100 is our discrete graphics right here. So if we look at the next one here, same error, same error. So what's happening here is the driver is trying to run those settings. It's trying to do it, but then it's doing math incorrectly basically, and then it's trying to recover itself. And then the next one here, same thing, no changes. Next one here, error. Next one, error. Next one, error. Next one, resetting. So you can see it tried 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 times to run those settings before basically the Windows driver said, okay, look, let's reset. And then it tried to reset. It did a reset again, and then it restarted. So restarted is where it started the driver back up on default settings, and now you can see we're up and running. So let me do this now. Let me now push the clocks hard enough to where it does a full crash, and I mean does not recover. I have to really push hard to do that. And I'll show you how even on a restart, you'll see those persisted logs. As long as you don't clear them, if you clear them, it takes everything from that point past and just wipes it. As long as you don't clear the log, you can see weeks of logs on there. So let's go ahead and push this up to 500 right now. I guarantee it might even crash on the desktop. Nope, it didn't because it didn't boost up. But that's okay. So let's push heaven. There we go.
The launcher didn't even launch? Wow.
Wait, it might have actually just insta restarted the driver. Hold on. I think it's gonna recover. Yep. Oh my God. Well, Jastic, I'm unchecking startup, otherwise I might end up in a loop of crashing, because this should now crash it hard, right? That was an insta. Oh my God, I think it's gonna actually recover that. So here's the thing. What I'm looking at right now is the Q-code readout on the motherboard, and it's showing me CPU temperature and it's updating, which tells me the system has not fully crashed, but the driver has crashed hard enough to where it's not recovering. So this means right now I may have to do a forced shutdown, and that's fine. We still are gonna have our logs after a restart. All right, so there we go. We're back up, everything's running right now. I'm gonna go ahead and reset this. Boom, let's not keep that. Cool. Now if we go back to Event Viewer, let's see what it says. So these were the original ones we saw, right? And then there's a warning right here. Good news, you can turn on HDR and display settings to get more vibrant picture. What the hell is
How's that a warning?
Okay, so here's that error where I applied it, right? And it just, same thing, error occurred, the following information, error occurred, resetting, reset, restarting. Warning, good news, you have HDR. Error. Okay, this is totally different right here. Look at this. It doesn't even have a message. Like, it's just gibberish at this point, right? Ucode reset TDR occurred. So, like, it was still trying to do things. Then I forced the shutdown, and that is where the information starts again. And then during the boot, it was like, whoa, we didn't get told to shut down. Why the hell did we shut down? That was totally unexpected. And that's exactly what that's saying. And then this critical right here says the system has rebooted without clearly shutting down first. This error could be caused if the system stopped responding, crashed, or lost power unexpectedly, which is what we forced to happen. So you wouldn't see this critical or these errors happening in a normal restart shutdown. So now we know, right? If you didn't go in and set that, right? You didn't set that crazy overclock and you got a random shutdown or a lockup or the screen went black, you would now know this could be driver related right here. Now it's important to have realistic expectations of what Event Viewer is going to show you. It's not going to tell you if you're thermal throttling. It's not going to tell you, hey, your CPU overclock is unstable. It's not going to tell you, hey, your RAM is slightly unstable. You're going to have to use specific tests to root out that sort of stuff, like memtest, and obviously do your different types of CPU benchmarks and stress tests to find if it's stable. It's only going to tell you, hey, something happened, and any data that's associated with that, it'll be able to tell you. Like, for instance, if you have an app that's crashing, it's not going to tell you necessarily why that app crashed. It's just going to tell you that the app crashed. So we showed you how in system it'll show you like driver level crashes, kernel level crashes, etc. But if we go to application, this will tell you applications that have crashed. This is me crashing Cinebench intentionally with a CPU overclock that was too aggressive. So with that slight overclock, it was enough to make the application like kind of have an error, but not crash the application. So that little error that popped up within the application wasn't logged here because it wasn't a Windows level error, it was an app level error. So the app was giving me some feedback. So then I pushed the overclock hard enough to cause the app to actually crash back to the desktop, which is what this error is right here. You can see application error, faulting application name, cinebench.exe, version 23.2.0.0, timestamp in hex code. Anyway, you can see right here, it gave us some pretty general information, just application crash events, level error. It doesn't tell you anything, it doesn't tell you why. It's not gonna tell you much except for what the exception code is. And you can see right here, this 0xc00005 is actually a error. Basically, it's saying it tried to read the RAM data and it was wrong, and so the application crashed. Now, this is why it's kind of important to know what's happening with your system, because that might lead you down a RAM rabbit hole, but I didn't touch the RAM. The RAM is stable. This was a CPU overclock error. So again, don't expect this to work miracles and tell you why something happened, but you can at least figure out like what crashed if you're starting to have weird issues and such. But like I said, it's important to note this is just a code level event log. So it's obviously showing you what's happening with applications and your system, and even show you security stuff if you want it. I'm not going to click it, but it'll show you what's happening with security updates and security background tasks and all that sort of such. But it's not going to tell you the simple stuff. It's not going to tell you that your overclock is unstable. It's not, other than the fact that it's crashing, that should be pretty obvious. If you went in and overclocked your system, that should also be pretty obvious. Maybe roll some of that back. But if you're on a stock system, something you've not touched, it's all out of the box, and you start seeing these weird crashes and stuff, you're gonna know something's wrong with your system, but you won't know if it's RAM. You won't know if it's a degraded CPU. You won't know if it's a driver level or a chipset problem. It's not gonna tell you that sort of stuff. It's not gonna tell you, like I said, that your system is thermal throttling. It's not gonna tell you any of that. It's not gonna tell you that your RAM is unstable. It's not gonna tell you that your GPU is overheating and throttling your FPS because your thermal paste is cracked and dried out, or you put wrong pads on there and the standoff is too high now and it's not making good contact. It's just telling you code-based issues that happen. But it can be useful. Especially when I showed you about how we were able to detect that the driver was why the GPU was crashing. So let's just assume now that that was happening, but we didn't overclock our GPU. Now we could know that we're having a GPU problem. It could be driver related, it could be hardware related, or you go back to that story I told you where Phil was able to figure out that suddenly our wireless device in our motherboard, even though Phil did the updates and the firmware updates and all that such for it, and it didn't fix the problem, we just eventually turned it off because we think the module itself went bad. You can start to root out those issues, especially when they seem completely unrelated to the problem. The problem was only presenting itself in gaming. In fact, sitting at the desktop, doing nothing, we weren't hearing that disconnect, reconnect sound. In fact, Phil didn't even notice on that run that when we were doing those benchmarks, that it was happening until he got to like tracked based benchmarks. What I mean by that is like it didn't show up in like Speedway, it didn't show up in TimeSpy, it didn't show up for any of the ones where you just hit go and it tests itself. It was the games where we control the character and start moving them around. And that's because of the fact that you're dealing with input, and those inputs are going through USB and such. And because of the fact that when those drivers were disconnecting and reconnecting and all that, it was actually affecting input latency when it comes to the keyboard and mouse and such. And as it was disconnecting the driver and reconnecting the driver and trying to reinitialize that device, it was causing hang with all the input devices, and that's where it showed up. But again, anyone that doesn't look at the event viewer might have thought that was a GPU problem, and the GPU was perfectly fine. So anyway, that was just our quick dirty video on how to use Event Viewer. It might save you guys a lot of headaches. More importantly, if it leads you down a rabbit hole where you're seeing a lot of criticals, or you're seeing a lot of errors, you can at least start using and searching on Google and other search engines what some of these stop codes mean, and that can start to get you down the right path eventually. All right, guys, thanks for watching. Hopefully that's helped. As always, we'll see you in the next one.